that's what happened.
Because it's all the whole every major city was angry broke people basically, and then they're given free money from the government, which then also inflated the dollar on top of that. So
So right, we had it was a. If you had come up with everything not to do, that's what they did.
Yes.
All right. Everything that made it worse is what they did, and I'm not so sure that that was by accident anymore. Eventually you can show that graphic of in the book.
We're referencing page 371 of The Real Anthony Fauci by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You can see a March Madness chart that Fauci and his compatriots
NCAA
did
championship
to pick
bracket.
which virus they would enact on the world.
Yeah, well, I mean, they needed to use fear. It was a social experiment more than anything else. And I mean, look, I'm not a physician. Unfortunately, neither were most of the people making any of these decisions. They were often very educated, but they'd never seen an actual patient. And the ones who had were denigrated badly. Like Dr. Bhattacharya. He's a chaired professor at Stanford Medical School, and Jeffrey Tucker, who organized the Great Barrington Conference, and they signed a declaration. Again, this should have been covered. These were great doctors from all over the world that said the lockdowns and these other measures would make it worse and will really hurt humanity. And that was not the narrative that was wanted, so it was not covered. And any of the signatories of the Great Barrington Declaration were basically had their careers hindered in some way or another.
Yeah.
And that again, science should be about asking questions, allowing different voices in the room to speak about it, and the absolute opposite was done. If you did not speak the narrative, you were shut down.
How dare you, Dave? How dare you promote pseudoscience?
Right? How dare you,
bastard?
I mean, well, this is what started happening to me. I mean, people started, calling me a killer and a murderer. I had one woman even tell me that I should just die.
Jeez, man.
Actually more than one, but it was usually a woman. And that was the same day that I was handcuffed the first time for not wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. Again, it got really bad to the point where I actually just left town. I mean, I just got out.
Did you go to Maryland or something?
Actually, out to Malvern,
okay.
Which is about 20 miles west of Philadelphia. And it used to be very rural. It's not so much anymore, but it's still, luckily, not like in Center City. It's also municipal. This is the other crazy thing that happened. Never in my life did you have to worry, how different the laws were going to be on one side of a street than the other. It started getting to where if you went to the Acme on City Line in Bala Cynwyd, okay, you didn't have to wear a mask and you didn't have to show in papers later on, okay. But if you went to the Target, which is in Winfield Heights on the other side of City Line Avenue, then you did have to wear a mask. It got crazy. Like, well, where are you? And that's not how it should be. We're literally across the street of a neighborhood that we're all we regularly go to.
Wow.
Again, that's not American. That's anti-American, and it's very anti-American.
Yeah.
I think that what we were witnessing at that time was a social experiment to see just how much Americans would take, and they took way more than I expected. It was American people that failed. When they were handcuffing me, the cops didn't want to handcuff me. Well, the first time anyway, but there were people waiting in line at a local supermarket, and I was able to go in that supermarket without a mask and come out pretty regularly. And it had some outdoor seating to eat some of the prepared food, which they typically sold there and people would use, but you weren't supposed to sit at those tables at that time. And I did. Now, I mean, I guess I was sort of pushing the issue, but I also didn't have a mask on. And I had already been in and out of the store, which every time I went in and out of the store was a problem. Like, you'd always have someone wagging their finger in your face for not having a mask, but they would let you come in and go. Now I'm outside without the mask, and somebody is waving their finger in my face, talking about how we're in the lockdown. Well, they didn't call it lockdowns; it's stay-at-home orders. I love how they come up with these nice words for these things.
Newspeak, as we were saying. Yeah.
In fact, when people started calling it lockdowns, right away the big wigs in the press, like Martha Raddatz, the rest of that whole crowd, and they would say, "Oh, well, it's not a lockdown." Well, I mean, stay-at-home order. I mean, that's a lockdown.
Yeah.
Again, they can play with the words all they want. They did that again later. So Cheryl Betty Gold came up with this convoluted plan for the masks and all this. And then when the injections came out, and I'm going to say for a minute, I have to call it injections. A vaccine is something that we've been getting for years, and I have no problem with. A vaccine is an actual natural virus. It occurs in nature. It is attenuated and then introduced to your body to create your body's natural defense system.
Yeah.
That's not what the RNA injections during COVID were.
Didn't they change the definition of vaccine?
I don't know.
Or something like that.
Who knows? What matters is that people trust the concept of a vaccine because we've used them for George Washington, they called it variolation back then, but it's been in use for
Inoculation.
200 years.
I think before 2020, everybody trusted it. I would say like 10% of people.
Right, but they were very different than RNA. RNA was, and again, I'm personally friends with Mary Holland. Mary Holland is an expert on this stuff. She's just amazing. She is the national chairwoman of CHD, Children's Health Defense. And I have to say that I really, during all that, there were two groups that got me through. One was the Brownstone Institute, and the other was CHD, because their information was good, and they were, it was not one-sided science, pseudoscience. But basically, the RNA technology, it's brilliant and amazing technology. It can be used to, if you have a bad gene, okay, and you have cancer caused by one of these bad genes, you can introduce an RNA that's half of a DNA ladder into the bad cells, and it will attach itself, sister itself, like sistering beams in an old building, and the bad gene can be taken over by a new one. All right, that's wonderful, but we don't know what all the other genes are, right? Because the whole thing has to latch, and we don't know what, it's designed as a cancer treatment, so you're going to save this person's life. It's well worth the other risks. See, vaccines, the whole concept of giving a healthy person medicine that could potentially harm them when they're already healthy that's a philosophy on its own. But this is one where we don't even know the risks. We don't know the long-term consequences of this, and they were giving it to childbearing age people. That's a big part of the problem here. It's not a vaccine in the traditional sense. It's not the actual virus itself attenuated so that your body can create a natural defense to it. This was actually changing DNA of cells. Whether or not it was great is up to interpretation, and the American people should have at least been told that. Instead, no, it's vaccine and it's 100% safe and effective. And then, of course, by Fauci's own words, at first it was 90-some%, then it was 80-some%, it was 70%. And then he had actually admitted in one of the congressional hearings, he's like, well, we had to exaggerate the effectiveness because otherwise people wouldn't have accepted it. Those are in his own words. So they lied on purpose.
And they lied about the effectiveness of the mask and the 6 feet.
None of that. They were not effective, and they knew they were not effective. None of that had any basis in real scientifically studied evidence. All right, it was just somebody's idea of what we might be able to do.
Yeah.
And then when they saw how the American people sort of
just took it,
they said, wow, look what we got us here. Okay, wow, give me. So it was so that day out, when they were handcuffing me for not wearing the mask, it wasn't the cops that wanted to do. In fact, they were on the radio going, well, what should we do? What should we do? It was the crowd chanting, cuff him. It was the American people that were the problem here because they didn't stand up to this enough.
So a crowd was egging on the police.
No, they probably wouldn't have. All right, and they were like, dude, come on. And they're like, all right. I said, fine, slap the cuffs on me now, haul me in, whatever you're going to do, okay? And I said, later on, I'll get to court, and I'm going to, you're going to charge me just like Sharon Stone in the movie Basic Instinct. You know the scene I'm talking about?
No, I don't know.
Oh, that's hey, anybody that hasn't seen that.
I've seen Casino. I'm a fan of Casino.
Yeah, Michael Douglas and Sharon Stone. This was her a great.
I'm a fan of her, yeah.
Yeah, the movie is, it's not for anybody under the age of 20. Okay, I mean it's very sexually charged.
Yeah.
But it was a classic at the time, or I should say it's become a classic because it was so edgy at the time. But there's a scene where they bring Sharon Stone in for questioning, and she lights a cigarette. This was back in the days when everybody smoked everywhere, and she lights a cigarette. And they said, "Oh, you can't smoke in this room." And she said, "Well, what are you going to do? Charge me with smoking?" So which at that time, of course, people smoked everywhere. It was not unusual. it was the same sort of thing. I'm like, what are you going to charge me with exposing my face?
Yeah, with being a normal person.
Just, So of course they weren't. The whole thing was crazy. Later on, when the injection started, Cheryl Betty Gold, that's when she became most difficult.
What was her position again?
The commissioner, the Philadelphia Board of Health Commissioner.
Yes. Okay.
And she had a resume that included a clinic in New Jersey. So she had actually seen patients. They had women's services at this clinic. I would love to get her on the stand and find out the nature of those women's services. But she was the installed replacement for Tom Farley when Tom Farley had to questionably resign.
So do you think that his policies would have been a bit more tolerant, or?
Well, we'll never know.
Do you think it's just suspicious, or?
Again, these are all questions that I'd love to see answered, but everything just keeps getting buried. Cheryl Betty Gold is now moved on. She's working at Penn. Tom Farley's working in D.C., I think. Obviously, Kenny is the mayor that famously said, "I don't want to be mayor of this dirty city." So right. So all, in fact, he was never here. Never. He was rarely here during his own orders. Because Cheryl Betty Gold, she was unelected. She's an unelected bureaucrat. She was making the recommendations, and Kenny was writing these orders.
She was the mayor.
Well, no, I mean she was creating policy, which is what was happening during all of this. You had unelected officials creating policy that then politicians were enacting as temporary law, executive orders, the emergency orders. All right, it was straight out of Atlas Shrugged. But so what happened was when she made what she did was she tied the mask mandate into the injections when that started, and we continued that in Philadelphia. There was an injection and mask mandate longer than any other city in the country and possibly the world. Finally, when Los Angeles lifted theirs, she kept it up for another week, and finally somebody smacked her and said, "You've got to stop this now." Because what had happened is the mayor was letting her go on TV. Because all right, so he has a brother down in Maryland, and he was spending a lot of time down in Maryland. He was not here much of the time, living under his own rules. But we saw that of so many of the politicians during that time that were making the orders, but then dining out anywhere they felt like, having
like Newsom,
parties,
the classic moment,
private parties everywhere that they'd have catered because that, I guess that was essential. Everywhere you turned, there was some corruption involved with the COVID lockdowns, stay-at-home orders, injection orders, all of that. And so for me, when I decided that I was not non-essential, and they caught me being non-essential, and that everything went downhill from there.
You went to one of your properties, and talk about that.
All right, so some of it I have to be careful because there's lawsuits and whatnot.
Yes.
Kenny had made clear that, or not Kenny, Wolf. There were so many layers of this thing. So Wolf was the one that made this. The governor, right?
Yeah.
Governor Tom Wolf. He's a very wealthy man because he owns a very large factory, Wolf Industries, which is in the cabinet fabricating business. At the time that he made the stay-at-home orders, anyone that was non-life sustaining was considered non-essential and was not allowed to work, including his own factory, and including one of his main competitors here. I say here in southeastern Pennsylvania, out in Downingtown.
Yeah.
And within 2 days, so there was a complicated method to get dispensation from the non-essential order, right? His factory was given that 2 days later, but his two main competitors in other parts of the state never received it. Well, eventually the one, I won't name names, but the one that's closer to here in southeastern Pennsylvania did eventually get it because there was a court case. There were court cases all over the place. So what he basically did was use the orders to shut down an industry, then opened up for his own factory, but not his competitors. Again, this was reported by the paper. People were so deep in fear that they didn't even see what was happening right before their eyes. All right. So when the state, the real estate commission has, and they've done this for years. They have testers to find out that you're not, violating any of the PAR code, ethics codes, right? And I believe that one of the showings at one of my properties was one of them, because they asked questions that a typical prospective tenant wouldn't typically ask. At the time of the orders for being non-essential, I've just described, what was happening with Tom Wolfe's own factory. What was happening in every industry was that people didn't really know what to do, right? It wasn't very well articulated what was supposed to be done, and some industries came up with their own rules on that, which the real estate industry did, and I didn't believe that those rules. I really felt that the industry caved right in.
So the ones in the head of your industry, the ones that were like would handle the licenses and everything.
These would be private leaders in the industry. These would be names that you wouldn't know, but anybody that's in real estate would have been familiar with. Yeah. Owners of the largest real estate firms in the state, one of them particularly. These are very respected people in the business, and I was hoping to get from them some sort of support that would say, no, we are essential. And we didn't get that. Instead, they came up with a bunch of rules that you were supposed to follow that would supposedly not break Wolfe's orders, and I apparently broke them. And for a long time, the Pennsylvania Real Estate Commission has had testers. That's what we call them. I don't know what their official title is. That they go out and they find out, make sure that people aren't breaking any of the codes, the protected classes, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's been going on for years. And I believe that a lot of them were sent out during COVID to catch people like me. I don't know that for certain yet, and I may never find that out. But again, a prospective tenant doesn't typically care about your COVID protocols, right? They want to know, is the trash included?
Is Wi-Fi
included, right? Right.
Yeah.
They don't want to know about, and how strict are you with the lockdown codes, and why don't you have a hand sanitizer, out in the hall? Things like this. Again, bring hand sanitizers if it was an issue for you. So I along with everything else, because this was several months into it at this point, I just thought everything just didn't seem right. And I thought that other Americans would also realize that something about this just wasn't right, and that they just didn't. They anything that was fed to them on the screen, anything they believed.
And it's like, well, out of all the things that caused the riots, and I'm a non-aggression principle type, but I don't agree with all that stuff. But out of all the things people could have protested for peacefully, and then there was
nothing peaceful about it. It was riots. And
I'm saying, like, if any mass protest were to happen, it should have been for the masks, but it was instead for something that,
again, it was any spark plug was going to set it off, right? So we already talked about that.
We'll get back to that, but continue.